we haven't been able to watch anybody back in and critique their backing skills because everybody's sort of just leaving. I think I showed this yesterday, but these two loops are pretty much full. And then the first loop is empty. I think what that might have been is a bunch of folks that were traveling together.
They seem to leave in pairs.
Yeah.
So they're at least traveling in pairs.
Whether you love or hate Airstream, Airstream is the oldest RV company still in production. And they're thriving, apparently. They're just killing it, man. Expanding and, you know, and they were almost dead. They were owned by a grocery, basically like a food, like a store company, Beecher's Foods, I believe it was. Before they were acquired in 1980 by Thor. This was Thor's first acquisition. They were started in Los Angeles. It's kind of funny thinking like Los Angeles today, nobody's like producing, like, no, that's not happening.
Even though the Lazy Days isn't there anymore.
I love that. Those are such great rigs. But in 1952, he opens up the Airstream factory here in Jackson Center, and you gotta wonder why, right? Because he could have opened in Elkhart. A lot of other manufacturers were there and are still there. There's also vendors and all that good stuff, but it turns out he really liked the proximity, you know, in the Midwest. He liked the access to the East Coast because, of course, LA is West Coast. So this saved some costs, but he also really liked that it was a small town. I think he liked the fact that there was a really good workforce, a consistent workforce, and just he liked that small town vibe, apparently.
And I bet he probably liked the Ohio State Buckeyes.
But it is interesting because, you know, as I'd been reading, apparently the California and Ohio plants could do things a bit differently. Obviously, we know how it turned out. California did not last. But I would be very curious to see how the original plant was in California, to take a tour of that. That would be really neat. I still have a little movie theater. You got Subway here, that's a staple. Casey's and Family Dollar, and there's some big schools. I believe actually they merged two with the middle of high schools are still merged, right?
I think so.
Or something like that. And so it's a very small area out here. I believe Jackson Center is technically a village, legally speaking. As a matter of fact, I believe these guys are on their own power source out here. There's also not more than like 2,000 folks that live here. And you would think that maybe everybody who lives here actually works at the Airstream factory, but a lot of folks will travel in. I always ask, even in Coburg, like the workers there, does everybody live in the town? And nope, a lot of folks will come out from Eugene and all that. They do have a mighty fine post office though. Lots of folks driving their rigs through. We see a lot of RVs through here, surprisingly, because this isn't necessarily like a main route to anything. I think it's really easy if you weren't intending to come here. It feels pretty easy to miss this area.
Oh yeah, you just stay on the highway and blow right by it.
Yeah, you almost never know it was here unless you knew. There's a documentary called Illumination, or it's sort of a documentary. And if you are an RV history nerd or you just like RVs, it's actually a really cool little expose on the Airstream trailer and the history of Airstream. And as a matter of fact, the first time I came to Jackson Center, allegedly Airstream did not contribute to this almost at all. Like maybe they had some historical footage, but otherwise they didn't give these creators anything. But even before I got my first Airstream, they had a little ticket, and it was like a little promo for this, and it was like kind of like a Kickstarter sort of thing. 8 years later, the movie finally came out, and I think it was worth it.
Yeah, Joel waited for a very long time. Every like month or so, he'd be like, "Is it out yet? Is it out yet?"
Yeah, it actually contributed to the making because I was so excited. Illumination, really cool movie. But in that, they talk about how they went on these grand expeditions over to Africa and Egypt, and actually the first early expeditions were like it could be any brand. And then they eventually formed the WBCCI, the Wally Byam Caravan Club International, and it was exclusive to Airstream owners. And on these expeditions, I mean, they were beating the crap out of everything, right?
Yeah, they would take these things places that you wouldn't expect to be able to take anything.
No, and today, especially with larger rigs, right, the twisting and turning, no Airstream, I don't imagine a single Airstream today on the factory production line could withstand. You know, because obviously the trailers lasted. I mean, I'm sure they had quite a few casualties or squeaks or a door latch that didn't hold and whatnot. But you also got to wonder, like, how simple were they back then that also contributes to them lasting? I don't think that like storage tanks, they were definitely not as large as they are today. And so that helps with weight. Side note, this is one of the Airstream buildings out here, but the new Atlas on the Mercedes Cutaway, Yeah, this might seem kind of familiar to, oh, they boxed it up and they screwed it closed. I wonder why. But this is kind of interesting. Here's your window, you can see your, I don't know, kind of fun to see. And I think this is a lot of R&D over here.
This
but
is an empty van right now.
Yeah, I just see the tail light. It looks like a ProMaster maybe, but actually if you look out here, you can see like they have steel scraps, and so like maybe they're testing out, these were obviously bent, but you get some screen doors and such, and then some aluminum scraps. That aluminum is not cheap, and they seem to scrap a lot of it.
Yeah.
But
they don't save the cutouts or anything.
No. Sully he likes the shade, and he's good. He'll park himself in the shade. And
he's just like done. Like he's like, I'm good here.
I will say again, for a dog that had never walked on leash prior to us picking him up, he learned that very quickly. He also learned where the shade was very quickly. So here, this is a U.S. foreign trade zone. They have that here because obviously brand new rigs come in here, and oh, there's a trailer. I love being nosy just to see like what are they coming out with next? Can we get a clue? But one of the interesting things is even when we had our Airstreams, we would take that. There was one spot in Montana we took them, and we just like pulled off onto this road, and there was a little bit of a drop in there, but we had no problem. And even so, there was people that like were driving by and they're like, "Are you guys okay?" And we're like, "Yeah, we're fine. We're just boondocking, right?" People thought that was crazy, but going out to Egypt where there is no roads, like that's a whole other thing.
Like through rivers and like over mountains and through mud pits and stuff.
Yeah. One thing though, I think that is different between today and yesterday, of course, not only like the tank differences and this and that, but also like, I mean, you just didn't have as many features. Like, and across all the trailers, they all kind of look similar on the inside, wood paneled walls and this and that. And I wonder, especially now, like, does that actually help those trailers last longer? Wooden walls that can be easily replaced much more affordably, especially if you're using screws and such, rather than rivets and metal. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of like, what's the difference? Because those trailers clearly lasted quite a while, or people wouldn't have said, hey, I want to do that again, Well,
and like thinking back to the other day when you were feeling the different walls, the different, like the aluminum sides,
yeah,
they were thinner, but they withstood. They didn't seem as delicate as the ones now do.
Yeah. Were they made? I don't know. But this is kind of an interesting deal here. So here's one of the formed units. I think that actually helps to create the molds. I think that's the mold creator, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong about that. But you can pop out the mold there. But these are the tubs. And so this is kind of the way, you saw this with the Escape video, how they're made. But you throw fiberglass all over these. So you wax them, fiberglass gets sprayed in there, and then you pop them out from here. But I'm noticing that this one, for example, so maybe this is the mold, just something like this. There are no air lines on this one that there are on that. So I have a bunch of these buckets, basically, these are very, very, very expensive pieces of equipment, and they're sitting out here rotting in the field. It kind of makes me sad. But these little deals here would actually, you'd shoot air in here, and it would help pop the mold out. And so I'm curious if they'll ever use these again or what. And I'm kind of surprised there's not another company that has tried to pick them up, or Thor hasn't said, hey, we're just gonna reinvest these into another company, because they're very expensive to get a big mold like this.
And I wonder if this one was like the final use mold and these are prototypes, because this one has windows cut out in it and that one doesn't.
Yeah, but see, that's the weird thing to me is, yes, but when you're spraying fiberglass, you wouldn't need the windows, right? So I will say that our favorite architect, I think, for both of us, is Frank Lloyd Wright.
Yeah.
I mean, the most impressive buildings, especially of that time, of that era, that it was really his design ethos more than anything. And they developed with the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation, which is not his designs, but kind of the same, they developed a Frank Lloyd Wright Airstream. And I think that the number one thing that I saw about that Airstream that I hated was the big orange square on the outside.
Yeah.
And then yesterday, no square on that unit that was clearly almost done, at least.
I wonder if it's gonna get added later.
I hope not, because once I saw that, I was like, oh, whoa. That looks pretty cool.
I feel like they wouldn't not put that on the branding on the model.
No,
like
I just
that.
feel like they could have done something different, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of funny. That's a really interesting trailer. Although those skylights, I saw like there's a channel, like an aluminum channel around those.
Yeah.
It looks like they would just collect the water. It would just pool right there in those channels.
Hopefully not.
I hope not, you know, but we had, oh man, we had so many window leaks.
Hopefully it's curved just enough that the water would run away.
No, I mean, it didn't look like it from, you know, the review of the video. But we had so many window leaks, it wasn't even funny. I mean, they were drafty, and they're all single pane and all that too. So, you know, you get what you get, but man, they were drafty as can be. And we come across Airstream Supply Company yesterday, and there's a website.
This is insane.
Oh, absolutely insane. And if you're ever curious, go to the website. So this is actually run by Airstream. It's just a division of Airstream.
You can buy custom curtains, and you can buy teak wood mats for your shower, and they have like, you have an Eddie Bauer, you can buy Eddie Bauer brand sheets and things.
So just the cushions for the Eddie Bauer. And the Eddie Bauers are weird. They're like white cottony material.
Yeah.
How much would you think? A couple $100 and you go, well, it's Airstream. $1,000, right? It was over $4,000. I could not believe it. And they have things like a teak mat that was like $250 or $200, something crazy like that.
The crazier thing is that people pay for it.
Yeah, it wouldn't
People will
exist if
buy
people
it.
didn't buy it. Yeah.
Come on.
Now here's something kind of cool. So this is a new, they're actually venturing out. And this used to be a bank, and it's still a pretty big new building. Airstream Club International Headquarters. And so that was the original building that I'd ever seen. That was the first building I'd ever seen. This looks pretty dang new, and it looks so new that they actually still have a lot of the bank stuff on here. And so they have a delivery entrance for, you know, it looks like a little like credit union or something like that.
Is Airstream Club International the same as the WBCCI?
I believe so. I think so. And I don't know if they're Airstream Club International. I don't know if they're rebranding or, yeah, because it says Wally Byam Airstream Club, WBCCI. You know, it kind of looks like maybe they're trying to get away from like Wally Byam. Here's one of the teller windows. Maybe they're trying to get away from Wally Byam and such, at least a little bit. But yeah, they do rallies and it's depository. I like this little flamingo. Have a stained glass looking deal there. Or it looks like stained glass at least. That's cute. I don't know, what do you think? Like, should they rebrand it from WBCCI to just Airstream Club?
I don't know that I have a strong opinion on this topic, but I like the history of the Wally Byam name, but also it's about Airstream. It's not about Wally Byam.
Well, but
So-
Wally Byam is Airstream. You know,
Was Airstream.
and we were talking about this yesterday, actually, and these are all we're just Persian thoughts at this point. That's some of these videos are, right? But you cannot separate Wally Byam from Airstream. And the big difference is today, there's no real leader. There's a Bob that's in charge, the president of Airstream, right? Because it's Thor that owns this. And, you know, and I think about it, Wally didn't have a board of executives. Wally was making the trailers and he was making the decisions and he had support, right? But Wally was a leader. He was really a leader. He had a vision, kind of like a lot of CEOs, especially at that time. He had a vision and he said, this is what we're doing. And he goes, you know, let's try this. And he was a marketer. The man was some of the best CEOs were great marketers, right?
Well, and he really liked to give the people what they wanted.
Yeah.
They want a caravan here. Okay, if we can get 35 people to go, we can go.
Well, and fascinating enough is the fact that, and you can see here's one of the, you can actually stay here and boondock here for a little while if you so choose. But interestingly, he didn't have like a financial constraint because he marketed these for the people that can afford the best. Actually, we saw that in some of the advertising. Another thing they have at the library at the Hall of Fame. It's really kind of a fun thing. These cute little scooters. But I thought that was interesting because that's very helpful. If you, for those that can afford them, you know, doctors and engineers and those, especially at the end of their careers or retired folks, but they did very well for themselves. And so to me, when I think of like, you know, Airstream Club versus Wally Byam, Caravan Club Internet, you know, it's sort of like, should you separate them? Because when you hear, you go, who's Wally Byam? You know, it doesn't immediately click, but then you go, wow, I'm part of a legacy, right? Yeah. There's some history there. I think that's kind of funny. So I would have left it. Although I will say, when I first heard about it, I did not understand what it was all about.
You cannot separate Airstream from Wally Byam, but you can separate Wally Byam from Airstream if you choose. And I think Airstream is a long way from where Wally Byam had created it. Like, it is not the same Airstream that Wally Byam had envisioned.
Right. You know, and for better or worse, right? Because you do have like Christopher C. Deem, who came in and really revolutionized the Airstream, right? Really made the Airstream design the way it is primarily today.
Yeah.
Beautiful curves and such, and he let them be a reflection inside of the beauty that is outside. You know, but before they were kind of like simple and kind of boring and dark. And so I wonder what would have happened if Wally was still around to like continue into the 80s, right? And into the 90s and 2000. What would these Airstream trailers look like?
Right.
You know, back in the 50s, they were doing some experiments with fiberglass and such, but those designs were way cooler. You would start high and then you end low. Like, it would have looked awesome, pulled behind a Cadillac Eldorado or something like that. And sort of Jetson space age, especially. And I wonder if they still had those today, what would they look like? Because the aluminum trailers haven't changed all that much. Although I would say they got pretty bloated, you know, and the shape it's almost kind of like, it looks like a big Tic Tac.
Instead of like a curved rectangle, it's more of like a oval kind of shape almost.
You gotta wonder, like, if they had continued with fiberglass, what would that look like? Back then, like, there's a whole deal where they talk about, they knew that fiberglass was a superior material. You know, you have way less rivet points, right? So it could be faster for construction if one team just does the shell. They never made it into production, and then they tried the nest again, and that did not go well for them. But I do wonder what would have happened had Wally, you know, not lost his battle to cancer.
Where I think they could have gone right and they didn't, if they would have made the nest a fiberglass version of a Bambi or something like that, like a small, like the same shape.
Yeah.
And just made it fiberglass.
It is interesting because I think part of the reason, you know, part of the feedback that I saw with the nest is that it was a wet bath and people didn't like that. And people don't like our wet bath on the 23s. And I think all of the Escapes have the wet bath because they're just an efficient use of space. And honestly, how long are you spending in the bathroom?
That, and they're a lot easier to clean.
They are. I think there's a mental thing where people go, well, that's where I go to the bathroom. I don't want to be cleaning where I'm, you know, whatever. Also, this is Wally Byam's Memorial Park, and that pool is a lot of fun. Although they kick you out if there's thunder coming. Thunder or lightning, rather.
Yeah.
But that was a nice swim.
That was a nice one.
But I think it's just a simpler way of doing things, and it just makes more sense. You know, that's just me. So you can't please everybody, but yeah, I think that's part of the reason the nest was also really expensive, and you know, that was a whole deal. But it's a cool idea, but it's not Airstream, you know. And I think that's part of it, is like Airstream, and it's not just Airstream because of the materials, right? And like the first thing I always think of is like Airstream's a metal. It's an aluminum trailer company, but it's like it's not.
But it's the shape and it's the styling and
it's really the spirit.
Yeah.
It's the spirit. When you see something, you're inspired, right?
Yep.
And you get that spirit from the style, but it's you know, Airstream had this revival when the interior cabinetry felt the way that the outside felt, right? And it just felt cohesive. And that's a hard thing to like put into words, and I think we'll have to do that tomorrow when we go through, you know, what is it that we love about our trailer? Like, why do we love our trailers? And what is it about RVing in general that speaks to us? Because there's so much.
Yeah.
Like even this Intech, you know, there's something about that. It's cool. It's got that big window. It communicates, and I think that's what people forget, is that design is all about communication. In one way or another. And that's when you go into a room and you're like, oh, that is not, you know, whether it's an RV or a house or whatever, it communicates. Architecture is all about communication, even on wheels. Mm-hmm. Really, RVs are just mobile versions of architecture, right? There's a pretty shiny Airstream back there too. I don't know, I feel like today's Airstreams are just missing a little something.
Yeah. A little character, a little life.
There's a little soul, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you guys think, though?